Next slide, please. Good morning. Welcome, and thank you for participating in our workshop. Our presentation takes about an hour. Then we're here for another 45 minutes to receive and answer questions and to listen to feedback from the stakeholders. Please feel free to email your questions at any time. Another slide will show you how to email these questions. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mary Boyd, Senior Engineer with the State Water Board in the Municipal Stormwater Unit. And next, I'd like to introduce the rest of the staff who are helping with this workshop. Next slide, please. Here is a slide with our Municipal Stormwater Unit. But today we have both staff from the Municipal Stormwater Unit and the Office of Public Participation. Together, we are the presenters, and we are also working behind the scenes. I'd like to introduce our staff. When I call their names, I'll ask staff to unmute and introduce themselves. We'll start with the Municipal Stormwater Unit. Paul, please unmute.
Hello, Paul Levy here. I'm an environmental scientist with the Municipal Stormwater Unit and leading the Phase 2 reissuance.
Jaime, please unmute and introduce yourself.
I'm Jaime Favila. I'm with the Municipal Stormwater Unit, and I work in the Trash Implementation Program.
Kyle, please unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kyle McNeil. I am a scientific aide in the Municipal Stormwater Permitting Unit, and I'm assisting with the Phase 2 small MS4 permit reissuance.
Sheena, please unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, this is Sheena Dillon. I'm an engineer with the Municipal Stormwater Unit. I work on Caltrans, but I'm helping out with today's meeting.
Thank you, Sheena. Jenny, please introduce yourself and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jenny Chen. I work at the Division of Water Quality. I work as a water resource control engineer, mainly working the Caltrans NPDES stormwater permit.
Thank you, Jenny. And Rachel, please unmute and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Rachel Del Porto. I'm an engineering aide in the Division of Water Quality, and I'll be helping with technical assistance.
Thank you, Rachel. Now with the Office of Public Participation, Haiti, please unmute and introduce.
Hi, I'm Haiti Yanamine with the Office of Public Participation, and I will be helping out with technical support.
Thank you, Haiti. Jenilyn, please unmute and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenilyn Guzman, an environmental scientist with the Office of Public Participation.
Thank you, Jenilyn. Now I'd like to introduce our workshop facilitator, Diana Messina. Diana is our Chief Engineer for Surface Water Permitting, and she's going to be facilitating this meeting for the duration. Diana, take it away. Next slide, please.
Yes, good morning. Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Messina, and I am your facilitator for today. Welcome to our stakeholder workshop that staff is conducting during the development of the proposed statewide NPDES Phase 2 permit for municipal stormwater discharges from small communities. Thank you for joining us during this period that State Water Board staff continues to work remotely. This is our first out of 4 workshops that were previously scheduled to take place at 4 different locations throughout the states. Mary and her staff were going to travel and talk to you all in person. And so you will see, as you saw those 4 stakeholder workshops listed, they were for different locations. We're continuing to conduct these workshops online, and we will emphasize our information we provide to you and our responses and our listening to your comments focused for issues regarding those particular locations. So please, if you're joining today's first workshop, but you'd like to hear more discussion focused more on other places throughout the state, please join us for the other workshops if you are available. Today's workshop, we are focusing mainly on issues and concerns in Northern California, although the staff presentation will be the same throughout all 4 workshops. Our State Water Board staff who will present are presenting topics that are under consideration. We are still in the preliminary development phase of this permit, and we do want to hear comments from you. The State Water Board and us as staff acknowledge the native lands of where we are broadcasting from. Today, we are broadcasting from Sacramento. So as staff, we acknowledge the traditional territory and homelands of the Maidu, Miwok, and Nisenan people in the modern city of Sacramento. We know that they are still working actively to stabilize their livelihoods and preserve their way of life. We equally honor the groups who have experienced economic, environmental, and social disadvantages as a result of historic marginalization. We know that we are meeting through a very challenging time, and we recognize the impact this global pandemic has had and will have on communities across California. Next slide, please. We are doing our best to make sure that everyone can participate in an effective way and that this time is valuable to you. Some guidelines and logistics for our meetings are shown on this slide. This workshop is being recorded and webcast. This is an informal discussion. There'll be no written comments to questions and no formal actions will be taken. Questions will be answered to the best of our staff ability. There will be a break at 10:15 this morning. If you would like to stay connected and involved in this process, please consider signing up for our Liars email subscription for further updates. You can sign up on the Water Board website. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's workshop is for staff to share information on changes under consideration for the proposed renewal or reissuance of the statewide small municipal separate storm sewer system general order, and to answer any questions that you may have regarding this consideration. Our staff are here to explain the permit development and State Water Board consideration of adoption process. This is a public process, and we do want to make sure you understand where in the process you as stakeholders and interested parties are able to come forth with your comments and concerns to the State Water Board. Our staff will also be presenting changes to the existing permit under consideration, which include permit updates, and that is any regulatory updates that have taken place since the adoption of the existing permit back in 2013. The changes will also include regulatory options that we have been brainstorming for school districts and community colleges to enter into this permit. So basically, these are options we're laying out to you as the audience on if and how the State Water Board should be including districts and community colleges and requiring them to enroll in the proposed permits. Again, around 10:15, we are taking a break, and that is going to be a time that we welcome you to email us any questions you may have that kind of popped up as you've been listening to our staff presentation. And lastly, and most important, we are here to listen to your comments and answer your questions. Next slide, please. All right, so on this slide, this shows instructions on how to submit questions and comments. So we have set up a specific email address, as you see on the top of this slide. DWQ stands for Division of Water Quality. So anything you send through this email goes directly to our staff, and we will have it transmitted to the speakers, and we will be reading out your questions or your comments for you. Please place in your subject line small MS4 workshop number 1, since this is our first workshop. Please provide the following information: your name, the agency that you represent, the location that you are interested in understanding how we are coordinating the issues for that specific area of the state. And then again, your comment and your questions. Rachel has just introduced herself. Rachel is our staff person providing technical assistance. If you do have problems, if you're being dropped off, or you have technical issues with the email or anything, please email Rachel at DWQ-phase2-MS4- I'm reading this, workshop at waterboards.ca.gov. And just provide in the subject line technical assistance, and Rachel will be there to assist you. All right, next slide, please. So with that, I am turning over the presentation to Kyle McNeil. Take it away, Kyle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle McNeil, and I'm going to give a little bit of a background on the permits and kind of where it lies in the history of water quality regulation. So to start off, what is an NPDES permit? NPDES stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and it's authorized by the Federal Clean Water Act, which was enacted to protect water quality in order to maintain beneficial uses for the public. And beneficial uses is anything that the public can use water bodies for enjoyments like fishing, swimming, drinking, recreation, and other beneficial uses. An NPDES permit provides an authorization to discharge the waters of the United States, and it is valid for 5 years or until the permit is reissued. So the permit we're going to focus on today is the Phase 2 small MS4 permit. What is an MS4? An MS4 is a municipal separate storm sewer system, which, oh, sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. So an MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, which is a system of conveyances that are owned or operated by a public entity and is designed and used for collecting or conveying stormwater. And so this can look like the curbs and gutters on the side of a city street where stormwater travels down storm drains and into a local water body, or it can be something that's like on a county road and there's a ditch on the side of the road. That's also part of an MS4. And so there are two kinds of MS4 permittees, traditional and non-traditional. And so traditional is what you'd primarily think of with like a municipality or a county. You think of the city. And then non-traditional covers permittees that are not that are less common, such as federal prisons or hospitals, military bases, universities, school districts, community colleges, or fairgrounds. Next slide, please. So kind of a bird's eye view of the history of stormwater regulation is back in 1972, the Federal Clean Water Act was amended, and the NPDES program was born. In 1987, stormwater regulation was identified as an important water quality issue that needed to be regulated under the NPDES program. 3 years later, in 1990, they began regulating the largest entities, and phase 1 MS4 regulations, which cover medium and large MS4s. And then later that decade, 1999, phase 2 MS4 regulations were enacted, targeting smaller entities. And so that was on the federal level. In 2003, the state of California adopted the phase 2 MS4 statewide general permit. And then a decade later in 2013, that permit was readopted, and that is the permit that is in existence today. In 2017, the existing permit was amended to include total maximum daily load requirements, and also trash plan informational orders were issued. These informational orders will be discussed in greater detail by my colleague Jaime Favila later in this presentation. And then we're currently in 2020, we're holding workshops to gain feedback. And then we anticipate hopefully at the end of 2021, we'll have a phase 2 MS4 statewide general permit reissuance. Next slide, please. So this is a rough time frame of our permit development process. But please keep in mind that this schedule is still evolving. Depending on the feedback we receive from stakeholders at each step, workshops, public hearings, and drafts may be added, extending this timeline. So this is just kind of what we're projecting at the moment. So in 2018, we started our school outreach and workshops. And then in the past year, we've been, the State Water Board has been drafting the permits. And today we're holding preliminary stakeholder workshops to receive your feedback. And the feedback we receive today and tomorrow will go into refining the permit more. And then late this year, we anticipate releasing a draft and a 45-day public comment period begin. Afterwards, a public hearing before the State Water Board will occur. A State Water Board hearing considering adoption of the proposed permit will take place, and supposing the State Board adopts the permit, then the permit reissuance will go into effect shortly afterwards. So that's it for kind of a background, and now I'm going to pass the presentation over to Paul Levy, who is our main staff on this permit reissuance. Paul, take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. So I'm going to step you through the kind of high-level changes we've been discussing on this permit. And yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate that we don't even want to say we're proposing these at this point. We're just considering them, and we're really looking to get lots of feedback from you, and looking forward to hearing from everyone. So some of the high-level things we've been considering at this point, changes basically compared to the existing current permit, are first of all some major reorganization and clarification, making the permit a little more user-friendly and easy to read and understand. We're obviously adding trash provisions to kind of help complete the trash requirements that the State Board passed a couple of years ago, which if you're a current permittee, you should already have started on those and sort of know what that is a little bit. Another large change is we're talking about including public schools and community colleges. And as Kyle pointed out in the last slide, we've already been trying to reach out to them for a couple years and bring them up to speed and get them ready to become awesome phase 2 permittees. So I'll be talking about a couple different phase-in options that we're considering, and some incentives that we've been thinking about ways to get the schools to work, coordinate with their local municipalities. We're also going to have a slightly expanded integrated pest management measures. We're considering industrial and commercial facility inspections, which are beyond what the permit currently requires. And we've been discussing some changes to the post-construction section, so possibly allowances for offsite compliance, and definitely want to clarify the regulated projects definition and maybe change some of the exceptions there. And this isn't necessarily an all-inclusive list. These are just some kind of highlight points, and then I'm going to go over each one in the coming slides. So first of all, the reformatting and reorganization, that might sound like a thing you would say anytime a permit's getting reissued, but as you can hopefully see from this example, the left side is the existing permit, and the right side is kind of an example of how we're talking about reorganizing it. Now, not necessarily that exact numbering scheme, but just taking some of the large, chunky paragraphs of text that might have like multiple provisions in them and breaking those out into more singular, citable provisions. And if you can't read the text on this example, that's okay, because the point isn't exactly what's in the text. It's more just the organizational levels of being able to, cite each provision and just read it more easily. So now I'm going to go into the 6 minimum control measures and sort of talk a little bit about changes we were considering for each one. And a lot of you existing permittees are probably already familiar with the 6 minimum control measures, but since we're talking about including schools and we could have a lot of new people on here, I'm just going to give this quick overview. So anytime anyone's enrolled as a Phase 2 permittee, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency has defined these 6 minimum control measures that everyone has to implement. And then within each one, there are kind of minimum requirements. And then on top of that, there's some level for interpretation. And then, each state putting out the Phase 2 permit can decide exactly what each one means for the permittees. So there's illicit discharge detection and elimination, which means basically only stormwater can go down your storm drain, making sure that there isn't other things going into the drain that aren't stormwater and keeping it clean. Pollution prevention and good housekeeping means basically any kind of operation and maintenance that you do in any kind of facilities, storing things outdoors are sort of set up so that they're not allowing things to get into the stormwater and for pollution to get into the stormwater. Then construction site runoff control is making sure that anytime there's exposed soil, which means it's open to more erosion from construction, that is dealt with in a way to minimize that. Post-construction stormwater management means installing either structural controls or putting in place practices so that once new buildings are built or old buildings are remodeled, that they're more stormwater friendly for both quality of the water coming off and for the quantity of stormwater coming off all at one time during a storm. Then you have public education and outreach, which means you have to kind of educate your citizens about what impacts stormwater can have on your local water bodies and their beneficial uses. And then public involvement and participation means you need to be transparent with this entire process, and you need to make opportunities for the public to participate and be part of this whole stormwater program with you. So now I'll go into changes we're considering for each of these different sections. So for public education and outreach and for public participation and involvement, one change we're considering is putting these all into one section. Right now they're in 2 different sections of the permit, and public participation and involvement is really kind of small and only has a handful of requirements. And really the education, outreach, and participation, they're kind of all on one sort of spectrum of public involvement and enlightenment on the stormwater processes and getting them involved in the permit. Another thing that we have been considering is moving the, right now there's several sections about training your staff on particular topics like illicit discharge and good housekeeping, and we are considering moving those out of the public education section and moving them into those particular other sections. So for staff training on illicit discharges, we're considering moving that to the illicit discharge section. It just seemed like that made more sense, and staff seems slightly different than the public. For illicit discharge detection and elimination, we're considering expanded industrial and commercial inspections. So right now, what traditional permittees are required to do is identify priority areas within their jurisdiction, and these priority areas are supposed to be places where illicit discharges are supposed to be more likely, and then you're kind of supposed to look at the outfalls from these priority areas and try to find out if there's any illicit discharges going on there. And from what we've heard so far from some stakeholders we've talked to and from the regional boards is that that doesn't seem to help identify very many illicit discharges. So the existing permit already has you make this large list of industrial facilities within these priority areas. And so we're trying to think of a way to maybe make more useful inspections than these priority area inspections. I don't think we want to go exactly to the level that the phase ones have to do, but we're trying to think if there's a way to sort of work these into kind of inspections that might already exist and are already going on in your municipality for some of these areas, and if we could somehow work a stormwater component into those. So, you know, we don't want a whole brand new inspection to be going on. We're kind of trying to figure out if there's a way to piggyback on some existing inspections. And another thing kind of on that same note is we haven't changed the requirements very much in what we're working on, but we did just want to sort of focus more on the illicit discharge and spill reporting, because from what we've read and heard, there's just more illicit discharges found that way from being reported onto the kind of like phone lines that you're required to have for reporting these. So basically, we just wanted to focus more on that and on possibly these other inspections instead of this priority area thing that most people said didn't seem very useful for them. Another thing is this section in the existing permit, it kind of makes it sound like anytime you see a dry weather discharge from your stormwater outfalls that you need to sample it for this suite of things and then compare it to a list of action levels to try to identify what it is. But I think one thing that's sort of got lost in that is that you really only have to sample it if you can't otherwise figure out what this dry weather flow is. So the whole point is you're supposed to figure out what the what's coming out of the storm drain if it's not stormwater, and then you're supposed to stop it. So if you're able to do that without sampling, then that's fine. The sampling is only if this flow is continuing to go on and you can't figure out what it is and you can't stop it. But we're hoping that sort of makes that part of the permit read a little bit better and flow better. And instead of having these large tables kind of stuck there in the middle of the text with all this sampling requirements, we're probably just going to refer to a guidance document, because that's basically like some sampling guidance anyway. I mean, if you're pretty sure you know it's what it is, maybe you'll only sample for that one constituent instead of this whole list of things. And then one other change in this section is that we are considering combining, there's two different provisions right now for the traditionals, for having a spill response plan and for having an illicit discharge response plan. And working with the regional boards and some of the other people that we've been working with on this really early draft permit, we felt like the spill plan and the illicit discharge plan, they're kind of all on one large spectrum. At what point does an illicit discharge become a spill, and who are you going to call if if it's a hazardous illicit discharge versus a non-hazardous spill. Anyway, it made sense to kind of put the provisions into one requirement. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go back and administratively spend time combining these, paper plans. You could still have two separate plans and meet the requirement, but just for the sake of the provisions and explaining what we want, we kind of put it all into one. And I know I've seen a couple examples of permittees that already have combined plans in this way. For the pollution prevention and good housekeeping section, we have been discussing asset management, and I know that's kind of a hot topic right now and has been adopted into some of the other recent permits. So I'll just say right away that we are not proposing the same level of sophisticated asset management that some of the phase 1 permits have. We know that the phase 2 permittees cover a wide range of different cities and counties and non-traditional entities, and we don't really expect them all to have that same level of asset management going on as some of those large cities do. But what we are considering doing is just reorganizing several sections of the permit, basically already existing requirements about creating maps and about inventorying certain things like, well, one, like the outfall map you have to make, and then there's an inventory of your different storm drain facilities and kind of prioritizing their clean out. So we're just talking about reorganizing those all into one place. So even though it's not a full-on asset management program, it's kind of putting all the asset management type requirements under one umbrella within the permit. And if asset management does become more feasible for smaller communities or for the whole range of phase 2 communities down the line, then maybe having this all organized in one place would help move into that in the future. For the integrated pest management requirements, I know there are already some in the existing permit. So I'm not sure how much of an expansion it would be, but basically we're trying to add these in anticipation of statewide pesticide provisions being passed by the Water Board. I know those have been kind of in the works for some time, and I know a couple of other permits, the recent Salinas phase 1 permit has added requirements in anticipation of this. So a couple of things that it might expand on from the current permit is possibly more monitoring of the pest populations and basically just more documentation that pesticides are really being used as a last resort, and that you took other steps before using these more toxic chemicals. And if you are interested in seeing maybe more examples of specific provisions we're considering, I would say take a look at the Salinas permit, because kind of the people who are working on the pesticide provisions gave us very similar suggested language for the phase 2 permit. So that's kind of like what we're looking at. So for the post-construction section, we're trying to make clarifications to the definition of regulated projects. That section to me seemed particularly like it had a strange flow and it was hard to follow exactly what it meant. So we're really trying to put that in a better order and make it more clear which projects we actually mean. And then we're also trying to clarify some of the exceptions. So, well, for one thing, besides regulated projects, the existing permit also has another category of projects called small projects. So regulated projects are over 5,000 square feet, and small projects are between 2,500 and 5,000. And while we were looking back at these exceptions, we saw that single family homes are included in the small projects, but not included in regulated projects. So that would mean a home between 2,500 and 5,000 square feet would have to meet the requirements of a small project, which is to implement a site design measure. And then a home over 5,000 square feet or over 5,000 square feet of impervious surface wouldn't have to do anything to comply with the permit if it was just by itself and not part of a larger plan of development. So one thing we have started considering recently is revisiting that, and some of the regional boards we're working with said that in some of the phase 1 permits, this isn't an exception, and we weren't sure exactly why this is an exception in the phase 2 permit for regulated projects. So that's one exception we're considering changing. We also wanted to clarify the definition of routine road maintenance. That comes up a lot, trying to figure out when, you know, cities and counties are going back and doing some road work, whether they actually have to install new structural controls for these. And, you know, the answer is usually that if you're exposing or affecting the sub base of the road, then yes, then it's not considered routine anymore. And we're going to try and go up and make that more clear in the permit, and maybe try to sync it up a little closer to the way routine road maintenance has been defined is being defined in the Caltrans permit, which is also being reissued right now. They obviously have to have a pretty robust definition of what routine road maintenance is, since that's their main thing that they do. We're also trying to clarify that a couple of examples of this have come up, even just like in the last few months, where there's a private project, a new building that's going up, for example, but then in order for that building to get approved by the city will say, well, you also have to fix the sidewalk right next to that and maybe repave the road in front of that building. And sometimes these projects have tried to split that up into 2 or 3 different things, and then it kind of changes how it's counted, whether it's a new development or redevelopment, or it changes the square footage that the structural control has to treat for. And so we want to make it clear that if you're building a new building or remodeling a building, and as part of the approval for that to happen at all, you also have to work on the sidewalk and the road, those all are considered part of your project. We don't want to, you can't break those out into 3 different things so that some of them then wouldn't need to be counted for your structural controls. We're also discussing a new allowance for allowing offsite compliance. So if you're building a project and it's going to be a regulated project and require controls, and it's really infeasible to put those on your site, you know, we're talking about adding a provision that will allow you to maximize your on-site compliance, and then whatever you can't do on-site, you can have an off-site project in the same watershed that would make up for what you can't do on-site. And you could also contribute in lieu fees to a larger regional project that could maybe be making up for several projects that need to do off-site compliance. And we sort of modeled the language for this off of Region 2's municipal regional permit. So it's kind of similar to that. So that's what we're considering at this point. So those were some of the major changes for existing permittees. Now I'm going to discuss what kind of requirements we're considering for schools. And so I discussed the 6 minimum control measures earlier. And so I'm going to just mention those again, because I'm going to go through each one for schools and say what we think that would mean for a school. And I also want to say that we're trying to think of ways to, you know, there is a minimum floor for these minimum control measures. We can't completely waive them, but we're trying to think of ways to have, you know, even more minimized measures for schools that are going to work with these other regional stormwater capture projects, because that's really what we want to promote. So if a school will coordinate with their municipality and work on these regional projects, then we're trying to think of ways to reduce their fees and make these measures even, you know, more minimized. And another thing I want to reiterate, one thing I've heard from schools is, you know, they need time for things to come online. And when you see this big list of requirements, it can be pretty daunting. But this, for one thing, we're considering phasing in schools. So certain schools might not have to meet requirements until later. And another thing is, for anyone, any new permittee, whether you're a school or not, the program builds on itself over the 5-year permit term. So this large list of things, it really kind of like works up over the whole 5 years. You know, the first year or two involves just a lot of planning steps, and it's not really until the 4th or 5th year that most of the program is really required to be fully online and functioning. So going through the minimum control measures again so if you're a school, what does it mean to have an illicit discharge detection and elimination program? So it will be a lot more basic than what we would have a city or a county do. But at the most basic level, the minimum thing we can have you do, you have to have a map of your stormwater discharges, whether they're going off of your campuses onto into the city, into another storm sewer system, or whether they're going into a water body like a river or a lake. You also have to have some kind of procedures of how you'll respond if you see an illicit discharge or a spill. But this doesn't necessarily have to be a giant book of procedures. It can be some pretty basic stuff of, you know, who do you call if there's a spill? If you're discharging into a municipality, you know, who do you contact there to let them know? And basically also passing, you know, a rule using whatever kind of authority that the school district has to make sure that, you know, there is a rule that you're not allowed to put things in the storm drain that aren't stormwater. And then the regulations do require us to have some kind of public education component, but that could be as simple as stenciling the storm drains around school property, warning that, you know, these do discharge to local water bodies, and just raising that like basic level of awareness that only stormwater is supposed to be going in the drain. Now, for the pollution prevention and good housekeeping program, what we think that would mean for a school district is that they would have to review the operations and maintenance practices that go on their campuses, and they would have to assess different facilities around campus and try to identify which ones could generate stormwater pollutants. And then you'd have to, you know, maybe alter those maintenance practices or maybe change the way things are stored outdoors to minimize stormwater pollution from those. So one example that's come up a couple times with schools is a lot of schools around here have outdoor lunch areas, and maybe in the past they might clean up after lunch by just spraying the whole area down, and that could all be going into a storm drain. So that's one example of a practice that you might have to change so that you're not spraying any kind of food or trash into the storm drain. Or if you have, you know, I list a couple areas here: vehicle maintenance areas, wood shops, agricultural and horticultural facilities. Those are all areas around school where there could be things stored or things worked on outside, and you just want to make sure that you're minimizing the exposure of all that to the stormwater, and there's proper storage practices in place. So kind of things whether you're in a stormwater permit or not, they're kind of all things you should probably be doing anyway, you know, keeping everything, you know, clean and organized. And one last thing, I'm listing it here because it kind of goes along with these other two, but the trash provisions I mentioned earlier, schools would also come into that, which would require that any trash generating areas around campus, they'd either have to put in trash capture devices, or they'd have to you know, put in place some practices to reduce any trash from getting discharged into the stormwater. And Jaime, another staff from our section, is going to talk a little bit more about some of the trash devices later in the presentation. So for the construction site stormwater runoff control program, that would be pretty simple for schools. They just have to comply with the statewide construction general permit for stormwater. They should already be doing that anyway, so that really shouldn't be a new requirement for anyone, and that would affect any projects that are disturbing more than 1 acre of soil. The post-construction stormwater management program would mean that new buildings and outdoor remodeled or reconstructed areas on campus would have to implement some low impact development features. Ideally, they would be syncing this up with the requirements of the local municipality. And I know another thing I've heard from schools is that they don't understand why these requirements are being put on them. They want to be treated like any other building in town. And the whole point of this section is to kind of bring you in line with the stormwater building requirements that all the other buildings kind of have to meet, because they're have to get local building permits and they're under the local building code. So that's what we want, is to kind of fill in some of these what we'll call holes in the municipalities MS4 jurisdictional area, where some of the buildings haven't had to meet these codes that they were required to pass as a phase 2 permittee or a phase 1 permittee. For public education and outreach, that means that the schools are going to have to provide some kind of stormwater education opportunities and or messaging on their campus or on their website. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to change your classroom lessons. You know, we don't plan on putting very specific requirements in there telling you what to do in the classroom. We know that schools are very sensitive to that, but what we are considering is just having some basic messages, and whether you're, you know, if you can work them into the classroom, that maybe that would be the most effective thing. But there are different ways you can provide these messages, or ways you can invite students to things that maybe don't have to infringe on classroom time. And ideally, this could be kind of coordinated with the local municipality. I luckily got to attend a conference a couple months ago and hear about some of the really cool things they're doing in Lodi, and having students kind of going on an extra credit, you know, field trips and sampling some of the water. And I think things like that, you know, I think we want to promote things like that, because that seems like a pretty effective way to, over time, increase, you know, public awareness and improve stormwater that way. And for schools, public involvement and participation, that would also be a pretty small section. Basically, you just have to be transparent with the whole process. Make sure you're, if you're having like a school board meeting or something like that, where you'd be passing any of these rules or deciding on how you're going to implement any of this, you just have to make sure that the public is invited, and that information on your stormwater program is, you know, publicly posted somewhere, like on your website. Is an easy thing that a lot of you know, current permittees do. And then every permittee has to do annual reporting, so that means you'll have to document what you're doing each year and submit the report to us. And I guess I don't know if I fully made that clear at the beginning of this, but these are, if the school is working on their own to meet all the permit requirements, this is what you'd have to do. But we're considering ways to let the schools work with local municipalities, and then maybe either the municipality would do some of these things for the school, or these would be lessened slightly. And so, like, for example, the annual reporting, that's definitely something that municipality might be able to help a school with. And then the school wouldn't have to go through the trouble of logging on to we have an online reporting system, and cities should already be familiar with that, and they might be able to help you with with that. And so here, this table is kind of showing some of the different incentives we're considering to get the schools to coordinate with their local municipalities. And we really want to incentivize this stormwater capture at the schools. There are some municipalities who are trying to meet this certain stormwater capture goals within their watershed. And so if the schools have open space that would, they could work with the city to put some of these stormwater capture projects in, and maybe accept some of the stormwater coming from the city onto the school property to help the city meet their goals, then we definitely want to incentivize that and make it easier for those kind of deals to go forward. So the first option here if there's no stormwater capture at the school, then you'll have to just do the whole list of kind of control measures that I just went through and kind of summarized. The second option is actually still the school is kind of just working on their own, not necessarily making any agreements with the local municipalities. But if the schools were to retrofit their campus and do a capture of the 85th percentile 24-hour storm, then we would reduce permit fees for the school and try to give them the sort of slightly minimized version of the control measures that I just talked about. Then the third option, if you do participate in a regional stormwater capture project and sign an agreement with the other, local MS4s, then we can even further, we're thinking that could mean even further reduced permit fees. And again, the sort of minimized minimum control measures. So to try to cut some slack where we can for coordinating on some of these regional projects. And then the fourth option, full participation in an existing phase 1 watershed management plan. It's really pretty similar to option 3, but in an area where a phase 1 has one of these watershed management plans or enhanced watershed management plans. And similar to the third option, this would require a signed local agreement, like something like a memorandum of understanding. We would try to, cut the permit fees as much as we can, and it would be the minimal level control measures. So these are the options we're considering right now. We definitely want to hear feedback on them, or of any other kind of options that might be worth considering and providing incentives for. So now I'm going to discuss some of the phase-ins and sort of criteria we're thinking about for which schools to enroll and when will they have to meet any of these requirements. So this table is showing both. On the left column, it's showing criteria we're considering for which schools to enroll. And then on the right column, it's showing how we might phase those schools in over time. So we're considering the phase in because if this is useful, we want to give more time to the smaller school districts, which we're assuming have fewer resources and it may be harder to implement some of these programs. And so we're considering requiring the larger schools to come online sooner, and maybe some of these Southern California school areas, because they have those enhanced watershed management plans that I kind of mentioned in the previous slide. Those might be easier for schools to quickly join in on, and then give a little more time for the smaller school districts to come online after that. And maybe there will be lessons learned as some of these larger schools start implementing their program that the smaller schools can learn from. And so then on the left side, the two different criteria we're considering right now about which schools to enroll at all. Well, one thing we've thought about is only include school districts that have at least one campus of greater than 1,000 students. This is about 340 school districts across the state from the information we looked at. And then the other option we're thinking about is basically looking at the student population of the school district as a whole, and only including schools that are greater than 30,000 students. So that's about 30 school districts across the state. So this would only include kind of like the really larger school districts that we're assuming have, well, one, more resources, and two, more kind of area that is potentially contributing to some of this stormwater runoff issues, and also maybe potentially more area that could contribute to these regional stormwater capture projects.
Paul, this is Diana, our facilitator here. I'm going to gently interrupt just to make sure I drive a certain point home. Thank you. That was a very good illustration of, as staff, our thought process. I want to make sure that our audience understands that we're not sure yet on whether we're going to propose to our state water board requirements for schools. This is still an open issue and definitely open for ongoing discussion. What Paul just illustrated here was the thought process we're going through on if we do propose this. We know this was an issue back in 2012 when during the development of the current permit that was adopted in 2013. Once again, we are in some challenging times that we understand where schools stand. So as this permit continues to develop, we really ask the small municipalities as well as the representatives of schools to really think through and share with us if it's important for the municipalities that we do pull in the school districts, or if it seems like these might be requirements that at this time or during the proposed permit term of the proposed permits, it just may not be feasible for other purposes that schools are challenged with at this time. But in the meantime, as staff, we are proceeding and looking at all options and trying to think through what is our best approach and our best option to present to our state water board within the draft permit. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Diana. And I think this kind of finishes my discussion about schools and about the changes to the existing permit. So I'm going to hand it off to our other staff person, Jaime Favila, and he is going to discuss the trash capture devices and some of the trash requirements.
Thank you, Paul. This is Jaime Favila. So I'll be providing information on the statewide trash provisions. And I just want to tell you that I and my coworker, Leo Cosentini, administer the trash implementation program here at the State Water Board under the leadership of our management team. And today I will be giving a history and background of the statewide trash provisions that describe the land uses that apply, those being the high trash generation areas, and how this applies to the NPDES permits in California for either the traditional or non-traditional phase 2 permittees. And Kyle, in an earlier slide, had already defined what those traditional, non-traditional phase 2 permittees are. And I just want to reiterate that the MS4 term has a broader application that includes Department of Transportation's, universities, local sewer districts, flood control districts, hospitals, military bases, and prisons, universities. Next slide, please. So the statewide trash provisions were adopted by the State Water Board, but prior to the adoption of the statewide trash provisions, already many efforts were being made to reduce trash from entering the state waters. As far back as 1996, thousands of volunteers had been participating in coastal cleanup days. They were finding lots of trash, debris that was ending up in the shoreline and in the coastal waters. So these volunteers were not only collecting trash, but they were recording the types of trash that were being discharged to ocean waters. And they were finding that the types of trash collected were primarily cigarettes, cigarette butts, food wrappers and containers, straws, beverage containers like aluminum cans and plastic bottles, bottle caps, plastic and paper bags. But the number one trash particle was something that had a 5 millimeter diameter. And you probably guessed it, it was the cigarette and the cigarette butt. Other efforts in California were being made in 2 regions of our state. One being the Los Angeles Regional Water Board had adopted total maximum daily loads, TMDLs, for trash in the affected watersheds of the LA and the Ventura counties as far back as 2001. Also, the San Francisco Bay region had considered adoption of trash TMDLs, but instead they crafted trash requirements in their 2009 municipal regional permit. And that permit covers approximately about 70 counties and cities in their region. So it is known that 80% of all trash that is leading to the ocean was coming from land-based sources. And one of the largest sources is the storm drain conveyance system. We know that trash not only harms aquatic life, but has adverse impacts on the beneficial uses of water in California. And those being aquatic habitat, drinking water, industrial use, and even recreation. So as a result, the huge adverse being made to our waters of the state that continued each year, the State Water Board adopted the trash provisions on April 7, 2015 for the regulated NPDES permits, the municipal separate storm sewer systems. And this was to implement a statewide trash prohibition. And it was applicable to all inland surface waters and ocean. And it was to take the place of future trash TMDLs. So it provided a regulatory consistency among the 9 regional water boards. And it provided a compliance option for stormwater discharges. Next slide, please. So the trash provisions, the trash amendments, these were adopted. They were put into the Water Quality Control Act for ocean waters, and otherwise known as the Ocean Plan. The Ocean Plan now has 2 sections that deal with trash, one being Appendix D and the other Appendix E. So ocean waters is one, the other being inland surface waters and enclosed bays and estuaries. And these appendices are essentially the same. They are a water quality objective that addresses the pervasive impacts on the beneficial uses of surface waters onto land and transported to surface waters via stormwater or via non-storm water. And what this prohibition says is that the trash shall not be present in ocean waters along shorelines or adjacent areas in amounts that adversely affect the beneficial uses or cause a nuisance. So the discharge of trash to surface waters of the state or the deposition of trash where it may be discharged into surface waters of the state is prohibited. Next slide, please. So these trash provisions were adopted into the Ocean Plan, but had to be implemented through the NPDES permits. As a prohibition of discharge, and it affects all the NPDES permits. Stormwater permits, even the industrial and construction general permits. There are exceptions where these total maximum daily loads are in effect. We know that the Los Angeles County had trash TMDLs as far back as 2001. I think they currently have about 15 or 16 trash TMDLs at this time that are for their affected watersheds polluted with trash. The exemptions may be given to those entities or municipalities that the regional board has determined can be waived. And so that's an exemption there. Next slide, please. So when the State Water Board adopted the trash provisions into the Ocean Plan, the enforcement part of it came over to our municipal stormwater unit. And at that time, I don't believe that any of the phase 1s or phase 2 permits throughout the state were ready to adopt these trash provisions. So what the Water Board did was they sent out Water Board informational orders, and this was done the summer of 2017. And they had to begin to initiate the planning process for these trash provisions. And they had to determine the compliance method of compliance. There was 2 choices. Track 1, which required the full capture systems in all the storm drain catch basins. And then there was the Track 2 compliance method, which allowed for a combination of trash control measures, which could include the full capture systems and a combination of multi-benefit type control measures. It could include institutional controls like street sweeping or public education. And then this had to be done initially in the preliminary phase, but by the end of December 2018, they had to submit a final jurisdictional map and then select their final track method of compliance. For those that were selecting the Track 2, they had to submit the implementation plan. Next slide, please. So again, the Track 1 requires 100% installation of full capture devices on the storm drains capturing runoff, and Track 2 was to install a combination of controls that reduce trash, but they had to be equivalent to a full capture system. Next slide, please. And where these had to be placed was in the high trash generating areas. And what a priority land use is one, it is a high density residential area with 10 or more dwelling units per acre, industrial land uses, commercial land uses, or mixed urban land uses, which included the 3 above, and then public transportation stations. Next slide, please. So here at the Water Board, we contain a list of certified full capture systems of trash treatment control devices. Many initially were grandfathered. These were the trash devices that had been certified by the regional boards. And I think at the time there was probably 30, there's less now on this list that were from the grandfathered list. Some of them have gone out of business, others have sent or allowed other businesses to take over them. And so we've had to revise our certified list in that way. We have trash devices that have been certified by the State Water Board. I think we are up to 22 at this point. Recently, we had 2 more added to this list that have been certified here at the State Water Board. Our certification requirements are more stringent than they were when they were being done at the Regional Water Board. And so we have our requirements listed on our trash implementation webpage, along with this list of certified full capture devices. And when we review them, we have to make sure that the trash full capture device meets the requirements. They have to have the 5mm screen that prevents those small cigarette butts from getting through and anything larger. And we have to make sure that they meet the flow rate for the 1 hour, 1 year storm event. Next slide, please. So the previous slide was the table 1, which was for catch basin insert trash devices. This table 2 is for high flow capacity trash devices. They do a lot more than just capture trash. They can capture other pollutants. They're a lot more expensive and larger, but we contain a list of these as well. So in conclusion, the trash implementation program wants to acknowledge the work that many of you have already done for reducing trash in our waterways. The task at times seems insurmountable, but the trash problem is best solved and doable with the collaborative efforts from everyone, the public, the agencies, the organizations, and ultimately the municipal stormwater permittees implementing a trash program that complies and achieves the water quality objective for trash and the prohibition with our timeline that this all has to be done by the year 2030. Thank you very much, and I turn this back over to Mary. To Diana?
Yes, to Diana.
Diana.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jaime. That was a very good summary of all the requirements that are already adopted in the statewide trash provisions. You summarized some very complicated material in a very easy to understand manner. So a time check, we're at 10 minutes after 10. We are going to stay with the original schedule of taking a 15-minute break from 10:15 to 10:30. And because we were able to finish now 4 minutes early, we're going to take a 19-minute break. And so we will reconvene at 10:30 to start listening to your comments and answering questions. In the meantime, we're going to keep the current slide up. And on this current slide, again, we have the instructions on how to submit questions and comments. Once again, please email your questions and comments to the email address shown on the slide with the corresponding information, and we will make sure we address that as we go into our question and answer and comments period at 10:30. Again, if you are having any kind of technical issues or would like technical assistance, please email Rachel at the email address on the bottom of this slide. And so with that, we will reconvene at 10:30. Thank you. All right. It is 10:30. Hello again. This is Diana Messina, the facilitator of today's workshop. We are now going to enter into our comments and questions portion of this workshop. I see that during the break, we had plenty of questions and comments just rolling in. Keep them coming as they surface. And I am going to now hand over the microphone to Kyle McNeil and Paul Levy as they start our comments and question session. Kyle and Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Diana. This is Kyle McNeil. So I will serve as the question announcer for this portion. I'll direct the question to Paul, and then he can answer it, or if he would like to, he can then pass it on to another one of our staff who has expertise on that question. And so when I'm announcing these questions, please keep in mind that they may be paraphrased slightly, or a combination with another stakeholder who had a very similar question, but I will announce your name and your representation so that you do know if your question has been addressed. Okay, so let's hear our first question. Rachel Quiche, who represents Quiche Environmental, and that their agency works statewide, as the question has a comment that on the school slides, it stated that schools would have to comply with local jurisdictional ordinances. However, schools are subject to the State Department of State Architect DSA review only, and they do not submit their drawings to the city or county for local review or building permits. This is currently what's happening, and our proposal would introduce local/city building permit jurisdiction, which varies widely over a state entity, the DSA. Rachel requests that we please leave all jurisdiction over schools with the DSA. Paul?
Thanks, Kyle, and thanks for your question, Rachel. So I think maybe the wording on that slide wasn't exactly what we meant. I don't think we mean to impose the local ordinances on the school, but we want to bring the schools in line with the local ordinances, which if the school is within a phase 2 community and we're going to give them similar requirements to the other phase 2s, then that would bring them in line with those phase 2s. And if the school is within a phase 1 community and we're trying to get them to buy into some of these regional water capture programs, then that would sort of bring them in line with that local program. So yeah, I'll have to take a look back at that slide. I think maybe the wording there isn't exactly what we meant. So yes, the schools will still be under the jurisdiction of the Department of the State Architect. Next question, Kyle, or
okay.
I don't know if anyone else on staff wanted to add anything to that.
Okay, it seems like not, so we'll go on to the next question. So this one is from Karen Cowan from Casqua. And so how/when will staff engage with Casqua and other stakeholders on developing/revising language for the existing non-traditional permittees and developing the new permit language for schools?
Well, we're trying to engage them somewhat right now. We did have some, this question's coming from Casqua, and just so everyone else knows, we did have some initial meetings with Casqua to get some of their comments. We're open to having more future meetings and digging more into the non-traditional and the schools permit language with Casqua, and with and future stakeholder meetings like this. Ideally, this meeting that we're having right now is going to be kind of more of a back and forth, where we would be talking back and forth with the permittees and getting more, options and going back and forth with ideas. It is kind of harder in this format, but basically we're trying to do some of that outreach and working on that stuff right now and get everybody's feedback. This is one way we're trying to do that.
Yes, and this is Diana Messina. As we see your comments coming in, and because of these issues, as staff, we're now seeing that it's probably important that we have some combined focus stakeholder meetings. And with that, I mean, pulling in representatives of CASQA, and for those of you that acronym is new, that's the California, help me out, so California Stormwater Quality Association, or close. But we see that it's going to be important that we have some focused meetings together with representatives of the municipalities through CASQA and any other representation, as well as having representatives from schools in the same room. And so thank you for your comments and questions there, because it is triggering our thoughts here that we do need to have those subsequent type meetings and have some fuller discussion with all of you in the room, in the virtual room. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Paul again, and I'm not trying to use this as an excuse or anything, but I also just want to point out that the permit, even before schools come into it, it already covers like a really broad range of cities, counties, military bases, prisons, etc. So it's just really difficult to take feedback from all of those at once and work with all those stakeholders at once on the one permit.
Yes, and so this is Diana again. That's a really good point, Paul. Thank you. And so as we go forward, we will most probably be having some focused meetings with combination of different interested parties, because we do know that the other non-traditional permittees are also being impacted in direct and indirect ways with what we are proposing.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next question. This one is from Jordan, sorry if I mispronounced this, Blau, or Blow, and he is a consultant in Mendocino County. And his question is, are incentives for partnerships between school districts and municipalities going to be offered to both schools and municipalities, or will schools be the only entities to receive any incentives?
That's a good question. So kind of the one example that we've been giving a lot during this presentation, these enhanced watershed management plans and allowing for this stormwater capture on school grounds, that would be the incentive for municipalities that are trying to meet goals like that. So that's sort of what one incentive we've been thinking of for municipalities. I mean, obviously there are a lot of municipalities that don't have that, and so other incentives could be increased coordination with the school regarding public education and outreach. We're open to other ideas of what kind of incentives municipalities might, or how the municipalities might want to, best work with the schools in these areas outside of this watershed management plan example that we're giving. And another thing is, we've somewhat thought about whether these same incentives could apply to other non-traditionals, if there's any other, if there's a way that they could also be worked into these plans, or a better way for them to work with the local municipality. I mean, I guess this sort of comes back to, I believe that the reason a lot of the non-traditionals are in the permit is because, similar to schools, they kind of leave holes within the jurisdiction of the municipality where their building ordinances didn't exactly apply. And so they kind of got brought into this permit to make sure that, these whole urban areas were covered. So, you know, I guess I have similar thoughts about those. Are there ways to improve coordination between any of the types of permittees, really?
Yes, and this is Diana Messina. I have a little bit more to add too. So this is a great question. Let's think about the big picture that we're trying to address. In bringing in schools and community colleges, one of the components is that we're looking at how we can maximize regional projects or partnerships among entities, enrollees in a watershed for one of the ultimate benefits of capturing stormwater and being able to infiltrate it or being able to put it to other uses. And so we are open as staff on looking at what need to be the incentives or the correct levels of requirements to have these partnerships. So as always, we do need to be creative on trying to address what our ultimate goal is. And our ultimate goal here is definitely to have partnerships with adjacent municipalities to address stormwater management more on either a regional basis or a partnered basis.
Okay. So this question might be a little bit broad for our workshop, but Matthew Zadar, who is with the San Joaquin Department of Public Works, and Katie McCoy were interested. I'm sorry, sorry, let me restart. Katie McCoy and Charlotte Headland are asking, with the water board incorporating schools into the MS4 permits, is it incorporated in a way that would alleviate them from complying with the industrial general permits? In particular, I'm referring to non-university school unified school districts in the state. Paul?
That is a good question. No, the being incorporated into the phase 2 permit would not alleviate you if you have facilities that also fall under the industrial permit. So it's the same thing for cities that are in the phase 2 permit right now. If they have facilities that meet the criteria for the industrial permit, then those still have to be under the industrial permit.
Yes, and this is Diana. That is an area we have to examine, as well as what Paul just mentioned, to make sure that we're not double regulating the same discharge. And so that very much may be facility specific. Good question, and it's something that we will definitely keep our eyes on to make sure we're not double regulating.
Oh, and this is Paul again. This reminds me of another thing we've discussed in some of our working on the permit language for the reissuance, is that we were trying to clarify in the good housekeeping section where you're required to look at, right now they're called hotspots, and basically, you know, I described that for schools, looking at your facilities and identifying ones that could generate stormwater pollution and identifying ways to reduce that. So basically, if you have a facility that's already in the industrial permit, then you know you don't have to do that again for that facility. They're sort of, so in that way, we're sort of trying to not have them double their efforts on that one facility. But like Diana said, you know, we're always trying to make sure and consider and not double regulate anything.
Okay, this next question is about schools and cost of compliance. So Matthew Zadar from the San Joaquin Department of Public Works, and Rebecca Andrews are both interested in this topic. Is the cost of compliance project being developed by the State Water Board storms considering schools? And are there studies which show that schools are a problem at all? Does action on schools merit the program cost of compliance? Paul?
I am not sure if there are any specific studies showing that schools are a problem, just studies showing that urban stormwater in general is a problem. And I guess like I was trying to explain about the other non-traditional permittees, it's sort of just schools sort of make these holes within the jurisdiction of the other MS4s that are trying to clean up their stormwater. So we're kind of just trying to fill in those holes. But I don't have any particular studies exactly on schools, no.
Mm-hmm. And this is Diana. Thank you for bringing up the cost of compliance. For the entire audience, when we say cost of compliance, we refer to attention that our State Water Board has placed on our permitting programs through a past resolution that directs staff of the state and regional boards as we develop permits to evaluate the value of the requirements that are placed on a permittee. Basically, do we need the information that we are requiring? How much value towards water quality protection do proposed requirements give us when it comes to the cost? We do not do cost benefits analysis, detailed analysis as we develop permits. However, we continuously have the feasibility at the top of our minds. And that is where we really need to have our stakeholders come forward and educate us on what are the factors that may not make certain proposed requirements feasible. And that's like economically feasible, financially feasible, or even technically feasible. So with that, schools has been one entity that has been considered in the past and now is being considered again. And as Paul stated, we do know stormwater comes off of schools, and this is why we are looking back into them, into regulating them. Thank you.
Okay. Continuing on the topic of schools, Rebecca has some other questions about, and so Rebecca represents traditional and non-traditional permittees located throughout California. She's asking whether the public education component for schools, will that require changes to school curriculum? Paul?
No, we're not planning on requiring changes to curriculum. And sorry if I didn't, I tried to make that clear in the presentation that we know that the schools are sensitive about that, and public education will, provide you, you can meet that requirement in a couple of different ways without necessarily changing the curriculum, but that's what we're thinking.
Okay, and then moving into post-construction, another question by Rebecca. Will schools be subject to similar post-construction requirements as the current phase 2 post-construction requirements, or will there be differences?
That's something that we're still trying to figure out exactly. I mean, I think if the school is kind of just going it alone on the permit and not working, isn't able to get kind of any regional coordination going, then I think the post-construction requirements would likely be pretty similar to what's in the current permit.
Okay, so moving away from schools and more into post-construction now, we have a a question from Oriana Hart, who is a stormwater coordinator for the County of Sonoma. And Oriana is curious, regarding post-construction routine road maintenance, will the state consider language that will allow full depth reclamation road maintenance projects to be exempt from post-construction requirements, provided the full depth reclamation does not change the hydraulic line or grade of the road?
I will have to answer by saying that, you know, I'm not completely, I don't know all the details about full depth reclamation, but I would say that sounds like something that we would consider, or that might even already be the kind of what we're considering. And we'll definitely log this comment and make sure that we look into that while we're working on that section.
Yes, and this is Diana. If we do have the post-construction requirements that are applicable, many times we try not to look at this kind of issue as exempting from post-construction requirements. We like to look at expanding the different avenues in which post-construction requirements can be met. And so, as Paul said, we'll have to look further into full depth reclamation and understand the connection and the parallels and the benefits that that provides, and how it does address the ultimate benefits that we want to see from post-construction requirements.
Okay, so next we have a comment from Colleen Hunt, a consultant representing Sonoma Water. So for post-construction requirements, Colleen would like to request that the permit include the ability for a phase 2 permittee to adopt a regional post-construction program with a neighboring phase 1 in an effort to have a regional approach. Having consistent post-construction requirements is valuable to both the permittees and the regulated community responsible for incorporating requirements. So currently there are phase 2s near phase 1s, and they require different post-construction requirements. And there are also some permittees who are phase 1s in one region, but a phase 2 in another regional water board boundary. And these permittees are then implementing 2 different post-construction requirements depending on the location of the project, creating confusion with these 2 different sets of standards and trainings and review processes. So Colleen is asking for a single requirement within a region to help streamline effectiveness on these post-construction requirements.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that that does sound like a pretty confusing situation and not very ideal. There is some language that's already in the existing permit talking about alternative post-construction options, and I guess you might be able to argue one way or another whether it already allows what you're talking about. But I mean, I'm not sure why we would have an issue with this, allowing the phase 2 to kind of opt in to the phase 1 post-construction if it still meets, you know, the minimum requirements. I guess that's something maybe we'll have to think about. And if it's not already allowed sort of through the existing permit explicitly, maybe we can think about adding something like that in there.
Yes, and this is Diana. And so with this workshop number 1 is focused on Northern California. We do know that the different regions and regional boards throughout our states just have different degrees of efforts when it comes to regional stormwater management projects. Ultimately, we do want to see the regionalization if there is a phase 1 permittee that can work as closely with their phase 2 and actually pull them into a regional project. that there's a lot of benefits with that. So we would want to write this permit, this proposed permit, in a way that is clear. We do know in the Southern California areas like the Los Angeles region, the phase 1 municipalities have partnered, and the phase 2 communities are pulled into the phase 1 watershed management planning efforts, and that has been successful. Here in Northern California, we know we have a different landscape. In the San Francisco Bay Regional Board, we know that it very well may be possible to pull in adjacent phase 2 permittees in an existing phase 1 effort. When we look more at the Central Valley and maybe other regions that the landscape and the urban communities are more widespread, that may not be as feasible to pull them in. And ultimately, it is the decision of the phase 2 permittee on if that municipality does want to join in on the phase 1 regional efforts, or if they do want to stay within their own individual permit, which is the phase 2 permit.
Okay, so I know schools likely have a lot of questions since they're a potential new permittee. So we'll double back to them a little bit. Sonia Delgado, working with the City of Paterson's Public Works Department, is asking, instead of having the requirement for the schools to be covered under the new phase 2, why can't it just be a requirement for the school to have an agreement with the local MS4 phase 2 permittee that will build the partnership between the school district slash local municipality? Paul, I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe you'd like to expand more.
Okay, sorry, I'm just sort of rereading the question here for a second. Well, so this question sort of gets back to one thing we're still trying to figure out is once someone is identified as a regulated small MS4 and, you know, listed in the permit as needing coverage, we're trying to figure out how minimum we can actually make the requirements. So I do agree that I think that if the school was already started having these agreements going on, and then we're already working with the municipality and doing some of the things that we're hoping they'll do, like work with these regional capture projects, then yeah, we probably wouldn't even really be thinking about enrolling them, I'm guessing. But I also don't think we can sort of, it's almost like we can't really threaten to enroll you and then say that if you do these agreements, then we'll cancel the enrollment. I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure exactly how that would work, but we are trying to figure out what's a way that we can have you in the permit and what are the minimum requirements that we have to have.
Yes, and this is Diana. And this is where, you know, we need to kick in creativity kind of in full force. And so thinking through that if there is an established agreement, or if there is a school that establishes an agreement with the local municipality, could there be a way that that is cataloged in which that school does not have to pay the full permit fees, maybe falls under a different regulatory category within the phase 2 permit? So that's, thank you for that comment. We would like to discuss this further during future meetings.
Okay. And we have another question about school incentive and participation from Angela Clapp, representing the Port of Oakland. So one option for the school incentive was full participation in existing phase 1 watershed management plan. through this permit process, it is anticipated that phase 2s will also have to develop a watershed management plan. Shouldn't schools have the option to participate in any developed watershed management plan, phase 1 or phase 2?
I think that's correct. So is this question is saying that, which I think that's right. So phase 2s don't have watershed management plans now, but it's saying it's anticipated that the phase 2s will also have to develop watershed management plans. Yes. So I think if a phase 2 had a watershed management plan that had these different capture goals, yes, I think that would also be a similar option for schools, that participating in that would, bring about these reduced fees and other reduced requirements.
Okay, so let's shift over to trash for a moment. Our first question from Brendan Ferry, who's a planning manager with Tahoe Planning and Stormwater Programs. What are you thinking for interim milestones for the trash provisions?
That's something that we're still sort of thinking through. So we've had a few discussions on this, and there are some suggested milestones in the trash provisions that say 10% per year. We're trying to figure out a way to add more flexibility to that, but at the same time not allow for it to all be done right at the end. We haven't thought of the best way to do that and are open to suggestions. I mean, at the same time, I don't know if we can fully just say submit milestones that we approve. I think we have to have some kind of like options for milestones that you would choose from. So we're kind of, I would say, open to hearing what ideas you all have on milestones.
Thanks, Paul. And a second trash question from Daniel Peterson from representing Yuba County. He is interested in exemptions or exceptions relating to the trash amendments. How would one go about requesting an exception?
I'm not that familiar with exceptions to the trash amendments. I'd have to look into that more. I'm sorry, I don't recall what the exemption process for that is.
Jaime, are you available to answer that question?
Jaime is currently trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So I think the way it typically works is exemptions are granted through the regional board, so they would be initiated at that level first. They'd probably get the state water board involved. I don't know whether there would be one exclusive for trash amendments, so that's something that we'd have to consider. I don't know if Diana has some thoughts on that yet.
Yes, this is Diana. Thank you, Jaime. I would say that any consideration to that would be would either be on the, would have to be on a site-specific scale. The state water board and the regional water boards, we've acknowledged that trash certainly is a problem. And so it all comes down to your priority areas, your high generating areas and so forth, and addressing those. So that would have to be an item that we would have to look at more specifically. But at this time, we don't have an avenue, or we haven't yet explored exempting a regulated stormwater permittee from any of the trash requirements.
Okay, so this next question is from Jameson Crosby, representing Napa Countywide Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program, and he has some comments on the document formatting and language. So his first one is, is regarding streamlining of the permit. And he's saying that the general readability of the document is pretty difficult. And in his experience, the biggest hurdle to implementing stormwater permits is getting buy-in from other municipal staff. And it's hard to get buy-in when the document is too hard to read and understand. And it's such a long and linguistically dense document. And he suggests that we examine readability as a metric and incorporate better readability in the permit reissuance.
This is Diana. Thank you very much for that comment. And yes, we fully agree with you. And as Paul was showing as an example slide during the staff presentation, that is one area that this entire municipal stormwater permitting unit is focusing on for this proposed permit.
Okay. He also has a second comment pertaining to the permit effective date lining up with the start of the fiscal year, making the effective date on July 1st of the year. And therefore that would be immensely helpful, lining up the effective date with the fiscal year date.
Yes, this is Diane again. Very good comment. We do have other statewide stormwater permits that the effective dates does come in July. And so thank you for that comment.
Okay, we have a comment from John Stiver, who is a stormwater consultant with Contact Engineered Solutions serving Northern California. And his comment is that he wants to be sure that there is still language in the permit to allow alternative designs to be considered, specifically in the sections E12, E2G, and the non-traditional corresponding section, that the treatment devices of a different design than and in these requirements may be permitted if equivalent effectiveness is demonstrated.
Well, this is Paul. I'll just say we, as far as I know, have not been considering removing that. So as far as I know, equivalent effective devices with equivalent effectiveness should still be allowed.
Kyle, can you clarify on that comment? Is that in regarding trash or just general stormwater management device design?
So in the comment, it refers to some specific sections, but I think we would have to take a little too much time right now to go check those sections and see exactly what it
Okay.
mainly just referring to alternative designs.
Okay, very good. This is Diana. I do want to speak to just the design of any kind of stormwater capture type facility. And actually maybe going back to the question that I may not have answered fully on the regional post-construction implementation and actually having consistency with the phase ones. Ultimately, when it comes to regional projects or even site-specific projects for any of the design for a facility that captures stormwater, we look to that capture to be at the level of the 85th percentile 24-hour storm. And so if that comment or question is referring to design of capture facilities, that is what the design is for. If typically in our permits, we do not specify the type of designs or the type of devices, with the exception of trash, in which the devices do have to be certified. And so as we look a little further into that question, we may come, or comment, we may come back to it later to make sure we're clear that we're addressing what your intention was in regard to this question.
Okay, so currently, you know, as you are all aware, our workshops switched from in-person to a virtual format due to COVID, and so Karen Cowan from CASQA, or the California Stormwater Quality Association, was wondering how do we anticipate COVID-19 pandemic impacts affecting the timing of new requirements? So will these impacts be factored into the phase-in timing of new requirements in the permit reissuance?
This is Diane. I'd like to start addressing that. These are very difficult times, and our board and our executive management are, really looking at the impacts of COVID-19, not only how to phase in potentially new requirements, but the struggles that municipalities are having potentially complying with existing requirements. And we do see this as possibly not only short term while we have these health impacts, but the economic impacts may be longer term. And that is because of the unemployment and the difficulty that many residences and businesses may be having when it comes to paying their bills, their sewers and stormwater rates, and that then directly impacts the municipalities and their local resources that they have to regulatorily comply. So that is a subject that our board and staff are, are talking about almost on a daily basis, and reaching out and gathering as much information as we can from the associations. So we do take that in very heavy account during the short-term impacts and possibly longer-term financial impacts.
Thank you, Diana. So our next comment is from Michael Stella, who is a civil engineer with the city of Pleasanton. And he has a comment on social justice, so he says, I applaud your efforts to consider regulating single-family home construction with greater than 5,000 square feet of impervious surface. Exempting these more affluent homes while regulating more modest priced housing is a social justice issue in my view. The more moderately priced housing should not be penalized with higher development costs while exempting the more affluent. So he'd like for the board to correct this unneeded exemption.
Yes, thank you very much for your comments here. I'm sorry, I'm rereading your comments again, and that's why I'm pausing a little bit. About the more modest priced housing should not be penalized with higher development costs while exempting the more affluent. We do take that comment in, and we do understand that comment. And our board does consider the challenges of disadvantaged communities. As we write permits, we try our hardest to focus on what we need to require to protect water quality. That's the first step. And then, second and third steps then do start considering the social impacts and so forth. And those are the issues that definitely start coming along as we have further focused meetings, and definitely as we have hearings in front of our boards. So thank you for that comment. It's a very important comment. And we hope to continue hearing those type of comments throughout the permit development process.
Okay. Another comment from the same person, Michael Stella, is addressing off-site repair work to sidewalks, road pavement, etc. in the impervious area calculation. Keeping property frontages safe from hazards for pedestrians is already governed by California Streets and Highways Code sections 5600 through 5630. It's important to local agencies to have local legal tools available that obligate properties subject to development to improve their property frontages for the safety of the residents. Layering on additional requirements that could trigger costly stormwater improvements would be counter to this effort.
Yes, this is Diana, and I may be stepping in front of other staff that want to answer this. We do understand that one of our efforts that we have been taking is trying to work with folks during the design of any redevelopment process to make sure that stormwater management components are incorporated in the design, so it doesn't have to be an afterthought. So we understand that different agencies, including municipalities, there's different reasons for redevelopment when it comes to safety and other factors. And so once again, we look at the water quality impacts and the stormwater running off of the impervious areas and the areas that we see do need to be addressed for water quality purposes. With that, Paul or other staff, would you like to address that a little further?
Yes, this would, and I just want to clarify, this was the off-site sidewalk and road repair question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to add that you know, one thing about the phase 2 permit is that it's not a retrofit permit. It's a kind of improving everything as you go forward. So we are just trying to keep in mind that you know, if some small part of this sidewalk or road is getting improved as part of this other project, then that could be the only chance to account for that with stormwater controls for a long time until that ever gets improved again. So I guess we're just worried about things getting piecemealed in and then not actually ever getting controls put in, when the whole point of the permit is to kind of like slowly improve the stormwater controls over time as things are, you know, redone or rebuilt. Basically, we just like don't want to miss an opportunity that won't come up again, while at the same time, trying to consider that some things are routine and don't want to stop routine basic maintenance.
Okay. We have some comments on some of the stuff we've been discussing in this question and answer session. Jordan Blow from Mendocino County, who's a consultant. I think we heard from him earlier. He wants to know a little bit more about the industrial and commercial inspection requirements. How will expanding those requirements be supported by the water board? Many small jurisdictions are short on staff, especially due to COVID revenue impacts currently and in the future, and adding an additional inspection requirements without financial support could pose challenges.
That's a good question, and I guess I'm kind of just going to reiterate what I said before, and we're still sort of figuring out exactly what these would entail, but the idea is that they're hopefully just something that is able to get added into already different inspections that are already occurring.
Yes, and this is Diana. Even at this time, starting in March of this year, our board recognized that because of the COVID impacts, that there may be some requirements in existing permits that permittees are not able to address due to the restrictions. And so at this time, our board has set up an avenue for some COVID-related relief from existing permit requirements. We are learning from this as we are learning exactly what type of permit requirements are a challenge under these COVID times. And so this may be, this is a good comment, a good question, and we will have to take this as it comes. We do have certain requirements that are required through federal regulations to be implemented in our municipal stormwater permits. And so we hope that the COVID impacts that restrict industrial and commercial inspection requirements are temporary. So we will, we will look at how current permittees are addressing those. We will look at other options, possibly other activities that can replace the inspection requirements in the interim, and go from there. Thank you for that question and comment.
And then a second question by Jordan Blau again. He wants clarification. Will the school provisions apply to schools outside of the MS4 jurisdictional areas?
Hi, this is Paul. And oh, I'm sorry. I guess I want to apologize that I did not make that clear in the presentation. We're only planning on including schools or school districts that are within another existing MS4. Kind of what I was talking about earlier, we just kind of want to fill in the holes of these existing MS4's jurisdictions. So we're not planning on including schools that are way out, in a non-urban area that aren't anywhere near another MS4.
Okay, moving on to a new topic. So Delynn Elson-Lloyd with a municipal consulting group for Northern and Central Valley regions of California is wondering, Paul, you referenced a guidance document that may be referred to in the illicit discharge detection and elimination section for sampling unidentifiable / stoppable discharges in the new permit. Will that be a new guidance document, or are you referring to the Center for Watershed Protection that is currently listed as a footnote in the existing permit?
Yes, I'm referring to the one that's footnoted in the existing permit, and I think if you either looked that one up or one of the other another document that's referenced in the permit, that the table that's in the permit right now was pulled almost directly from the guidance document, I think. So I guess we were just thinking that the table kind of, as I think Jameson was pointing out, it's a big block of stuff in there that definitely makes it less readable. And yeah, maybe we'll just be better referencing this guidance document.
Thanks, Paul. So Angela Clapp with the Port of Oakland has another comment that she submitted. So existing non-traditionals have not been given the same consideration and permit review opportunities as traditional phase twos in the permit revision process, including the state only working on the traditional text and not working through how that will work for existing non-traditionals. Angela feels that non-traditionals have been ignored or lumped in as an afterthought, leading to real difficulties or infeasibility in implementation. And she'd like to ask that we consider existing non-traditionals as much as traditionals in the permit reissuance.
So that's a good comment, and I guess, like I stated earlier, it's difficult to consider all the different entities that this permit covers at once, and maybe this is my fault, but looking back at the way, and yeah, maybe I just have a wrong and incorrect viewpoint on this, but when I look back through the existing permit, it seems clear that, and I guess this is what you're saying is wrong, it seems clear that the permit was written first for the traditionals, and then that those requirements were kind of augmented somewhat for the non-traditionals. So I guess my thought was that writing the reissuance, it would make sense to sort of figure out the requirements for the traditionals first, and then again augment those for the non-traditionals, which seems like what they did previously. But yeah, maybe, I guess I hadn't really considered that maybe that's not the best way to go about it. And at the same time, how completely different can you make the requirements without it, I don't know, almost becoming a whole different permit? But anyway, I definitely will have been trying to consider, how all these things apply to non-traditionals, and trying to go through some, some of the language. And it's almost every time that I'm meeting up with some of the regional board subcommittees, we find parts in there that seem like they were just carried over from the traditional part, and it's kind of confusing exactly how they're applicable. But the non-traditionals cover such a wide range too. Some of them seem like actually similar to cities, where things like public education for stormwater friendly gardening could apply if you're like a military base that actually has houses on the base, but then obviously that wouldn't apply to something like a prison or a hospital. So we are taking non-traditionals into consideration, but it's just hard to, it's a challenge considering such a wide range of types of entities.
Okay, expanding on that a little bit more, Angela has another comment stating that the Port of Oakland is a public agency that is 100% not funded by taxes and is instead funded by seaport, airport, and commercial real estate revenue generation. And since the Oakland airport has been uniquely affected by COVID and lost 96% of ridership and associated revenue for the airport, the Port of Oakland may uniquely have an ability to implement new programs without financial stress. And as such, they're asking that the state board survey us and other non-traditionals who for unique issues related to COVID and address in the permits.
Yes, this is Diana Messina. Thank you for that comment. We understand that, and I think one of the words I got from your comment is the word unique. That may be a situation that we would have to look at on a facility-specific basis or a permittee-specific basis, and also look at what the source of the challenges is, or what the sources of the challenges are, and the duration of the challenge. So thank you very much for that comment. And if we can have a further discussion that provides a little more detail about the sources as well as the duration, that would be more helpful for a staff to develop these proposed requirements, as well as looking at any challenges right now with existing requirements.
Hi, this is Paul, and I just want to point out another sort of question that I saw in the background, but I think hasn't been officially read yet. This is reminding me, someone was asking about the waiver process, and if we were considering new types of waivers and how those might apply to schools. And that's another area where all the waiver criteria right now are pretty geared towards traditional entities. So I don't know if this is an example of something that might be a new type of waiver or something similar, but that would be more applicable to non-traditionals if they get in these very specific situations. I'm not sure, just maybe just throwing that thought out there.
Okay, this is Kyle, and so we're not getting any more questions on new content, it seems, but we do have 15 more minutes in our question and answer session. So I guess while we're waiting for any potentially new questions to come in, Paul or Diana, are there any things that, based on like the questions we've been receiving, you'd like to maybe reiterate that maybe wasn't as addressed in enough detail that you might feel could deserve some greater explanation on the topics of schools, post-construction requirements, non-traditionals, or any of the other question topics that we've had so far?
Yes, Kyle, thanks for asking that. This is Diana. I do see that our one of our first comments that came in, and that was from Karen Cohen, does address TMDLs. And so if you'll scroll up to one of the very first comment we have on our list, and I can go ahead and read it. It states, given the very real budget constraints, it would be helpful to identify the desired outcome of incorporating schools and focusing their requirements on achieving these outcomes while providing lead times to begin implementing the programs to begin achieving these outcomes. So that was one comment that I know we discussed. And as we are talking and discussing about pulling schools in, we are not necessarily looking to put the full requirements on them when it comes to TMDLs. I'm not sure if I'm reading this comment incorrectly and if it's affiliated with TMDLs, but that is one of the things I want to convey. The comment then does go forward and say TMDLs, will additional TMDLs be added to attachment G? If so, which ones? If so, has State Water Board received input from the regional boards on specific TMDL language? So, Paul, can you address that, please?
Yes. So I've been working closely with the regional boards, and so far, I guess I can say I've only heard about a handful of new TMDLs going in, a couple of, I think, pesticide TMDLs in Region 5, and there was another TMDL in Region 1 that's escaping me right now exactly what it was. But so far, I haven't seen a large number of them, and once I get more clarity on exactly what they are, I can maybe share those so that you could possibly reach out to their board about them.
Okay, and we just received a question from Rebecca Andrews, who we've heard from earlier, representing traditional and non-traditional permittees throughout California. And she's wondering, how will Attachment G incorporate TMDLs for new Phase 2 entities without creating issues of immediate non-compliance for deadlines that have already passed or that are imminent?
That's a good question. So that either might require some alternative TMDL compliance options or time schedule orders. Yeah, at this point, it's not clear exactly which TMDL. So, for example, if all the schools got brought in, we're not sure exactly which TMDLs would apply to schools. We haven't gone through each one yet, figured out exactly how they would all apply.
Yes, this is Diana Messina. that is one issue that staff is also looking into right now as they continue the development of the reissuance for the statewide Caltrans permit. And so with that permit, we do look at the potential need for a time schedule order. We know with our incorporation of TMDLs into the current phase 2 permit, which took place a couple years back, it does place some of the municipalities in a position that they may need more time. And so at this time, we're not considering recommending to the State Water Board to issue a time schedule order. However, that would probably be a very important discussion for the municipality to have with their regional water board.
Okay, we have a couple new questions coming in. So this next one is from Ryan D. Gleason, who is a part of Wrkshp and Race Consulting Engineers. And he's asking who would be enforcing the new phase 2 permit requirements on new permittees? Would it be the local regional water boards or, enforcing and auditing permittees, or would the state be the ones responsible for that?
This is Paul, and I'll say similar to existing permittees that the regional board would be the ones doing the auditing and the enforcing, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, this is Diana. That's correct. We continue with the same structure we have for all our statewide permits, which is that the State Water Board issues the permit. Our State Water Board staff work with the permittees to enroll them. Our executive director has the authority under our board to approve the deliverables. And we look to our regional boards to go forward with compliance determination and any form of enforcement that that regional board deems necessary.
Okay, we have another trash question from Trisha Wotan, I believe, from the City of Monterey's Public Works Department. So I'll read it here. If a permittee has been annually monitoring their priority land use areas for trash using the OVTA method or similar, and those priority land use areas or a portion of those areas have been shown to be low trash generating, might the State Water Board consider allowing those agencies a trash regulation or like an option for waiver for the ability to stop monitoring, tracking, etc. on those areas and focus their trash efforts and community resources in the medium to very high trash generating areas?
Hi, this is Jaime. Yes, that was the intent of the trash provisions, that if you have a priority land use that does not have a high trash generating area, to look at an alternative area that does. And it may not even be, but if you were to propose that, that would seem to work.
Okay, and another question from Trisha on the post-construction requirements. So how will the post-construction requirement clarifications mentioned today affect or not affect the Central Coast post-construction regulations for development?
Hi, this is Paul, so I can answer this. So for everyone else, if you're not aware, the phase 2 permit does have a provision towards the end of the post-construction section that says that a regional board can come up with their own region-specific requirements and pass it and get it adopted by the regional board. So Region 3 has done this, and these requirements apply to all the Phase 2 entities in Region 3 and also to the Phase 1 Salinas in Region 3. And so they have this, really nice set of requirements that's consistent throughout their whole region. We're planning on keeping that provision, allowing them to have those requirements. And so I think the changes to the general Phase 2 post-construction requirements shouldn't really affect the Phase 3 region-wide requirements.
Okay, we have another trash question from Delynn Ellison Lloyd, representing Municipal Consulting Group representing clients in the Northern region and Central Valley region. I think this may have previously just been answered, but I guess with specificity to track to, so the question is, with regards to the trash requirements, in order to preserve MS4 resources, please consider reducing the number of field inspections for track 2 required when a priority land use area is identified as a low or no trash generation area through previous inspections. Jaime, do you?
Yes. Again, yes, the intent is if a PL or priority land use area is not impacted with high trash generation. In fact, it's considered green and hardly any trash there, is to look for another location where there is a hot spot or high trash generation.
So to clarify, can they completely eliminate field inspections in that low or no trash generation area, or do they still have to inspect on a lower frequency?
Yes, they would make that proposal to us, and we'd work with the regional board to ensure that that's exactly what was happening. And we would work to make sure that they didn't have to no longer inspect that area, or what the minimum requirements would entail.
Okay, thank you, Jaime. So I don't see any new questions or comments coming in at this time.
We're waiting for Sean. Tell us we're waiting for Sean.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Kyle. We're working with Sean Bothwell, and another stakeholder and interested party listening in, and he's not able to get his comments through. And so we want to make sure that we address it once we get his comments.
Okay, thank you. Yes, his questions did just come through now. So Sean Bothwell, based in Sacramento, but working with clients statewide and representing the California Coastkeeper Alliance. His first question is, did the State Water Board consider adding the statutory requirements and/or state board guidance regarding SB 205, which is the Industrial General Permit non-filers? It might be a good best practice to include for detecting illicit discharges.
And good, that's a good comment, Sean. Thank you. This is Diana. No, we did not, at least not that I am aware of. And we can look at where there is a link there. We do know that the Senate Bill 205, which does require enrollment under the Industrial Stormwater General Permit, it provides more requirements onto the local cities and counties to assure that when they issue business licenses, that the businesses are properly enrolled. That this proposed permit is one avenue where we can start implementing those requirements, since that's exactly who we're regulating here, are the cities and counties. So thank you for that comment, and we look forward to further discussing possible details on how to incorporate that.
Okay, and a second question comment from Sean Bothwell. Since the phase 2 permit will be adopted after December 2nd, 2020, 5 years after the effective date for the trash amendments, permittees will have less than the 10 years to comply with the trash provisions once the permit is adopted. Has staff considered making it explicit that all phase 2 permittees must be in compliance with the trash amendments by no later than December 2nd, 2030?
Hi, this is Jaime. The final deadline for coming to compliance with the trash prohibition is December 2nd, 2030. It's my understanding that my coworker had begun to write on crafting the trash requirements for the phase 2 permit, and those have not gone very far yet. But this is something that we will be looking at. And we had already discussed interim timelines, which is a very good thing, so that nobody thinks that they can wait till the last minute to try to implement this prohibition. So this is something that we're going to be discussing in the near future.
And yes, this is Diana. To expand this conversation a little bit to make sure that everyone in the audience understands, the statewide trash provisions, which are implemented through the ocean plan and the inland surface water plan, and that big long title, as was described in the staff presentation, those are statewide regulations. And in those regulations, it states that the trash provisions, it states that all the permittees that are subject to the trash provisions must be in full compliance by a date in 2030. That is what Sean Bothwell is referring to. And so as we implement these provisions, and actually any provisions from any regulations in a permit, those compliance dates hold. And so our state water board cannot change a date in regulation through a permitting action. Yes, you're correct. This is the first time these requirements are being implemented in this permit, which may be adopted in 2021, only giving 9 years for that full compliance. But that is the situation in which we're under, and we have been discussing trash provisions with a lot of our permittees for quite a while, and so we're hoping all the permittees were quite aware of that date already. When it comes to any other new permittees, potentially such as schools, we are looking at requirements and the feasibility of requirements in which they can comply by that date.
A question just came in under logistics.
It's time to cut it off.
And I'm sorry, Jaime or Kyle, I heard you saying something, but we can't quite hear.
Oh, I wasn't sure if we're taking more questions because of the time.
So we have one last question, and this is relevant to everyone. The question is asking whether workshop questions and comments will be available for the public. So these workshops will be recorded and then posted at a later date, and we will send everyone who registers and signed up we'll send that link and let you know when it is available. However, today is an informal discussion, and so we will not be issuing any written responses or anything like that. It's just what we discussed today. So you'll have to refer to the recording once it's posted.
Okay, and thank you, Kyle. And this is a good time to do a time check, and actually the timing is perfect. It is currently 11:49, And so I'm going to go forward with the with the slide that you see on your screen and the next slides. If there are any more questions or comments, please don't hesitate to email them to staff. We will be reading them after the workshop. If they are global questions and comments, we're happy to incorporate that in our other 3 workshops to give that information out to audiences. Once again, we're not responding in writing to any of the questions or comments. However, as staff, we are open to continue meeting with all of you folks, hopefully through the associations or through other group representation to where we can make the meetings as efficient as necessary. But our staff is always available during the through the contact information. And so here are the next steps when it comes to the development of this proposed reissuance. You've met Mary and the full municipal stormwater unit staff. Mary's staff will continue developing the permits, continue having meetings, continue discussing issues with the regional boards and so forth. And they will develop what we call a draft permit. In fact, let me emphasize that everything we do as staff and everything we put down pen to paper is draft until our state water board actually adopts the permit. So please don't take anything we say as set in stone. Everything staff mentions, it's always proposed until our state water board finally adopts a permit. So after our staff develops the draft permits, our state water board, we issue the draft permit for a public comment period. As this is a statewide permit, typically the shortest public comment period is 45 days. We take into account what's going on during this time period, and if more time is needed, we want to make sure we give all the stakeholders and interested parties enough time to provide public comments. During the public comment period, we like to ask our state water board to hold a public hearing. And in that public hearing, staff provides just a foundational presentation to make sure we educate our board and the audience on the draft permit that we issued out for public comments. And then during the public hearing, the time goes to all the stakeholders and interested parties that want to speak directly to our board members. During this COVID time period, our state water board is conducting business as usual with online board meetings. And so depending on the timing of that public hearing, will depend on if it is online or in person, but either way, we are still going forward with these steps for our permit development. So then we have the public hearing, and then the public comment period comes to a close. As staff, that's where our heaviest workload is at. We look through all the public comments, we consider all the public comments. We assure that our state water board is able to see all the public comments as members, our state water board members. Then as staff, we revise the draft permits in accordance with the public comments in which we agree with. We respond to all public comments, whether we agree with them, whether it's feasible for us to incorporate, and so forth. And then at that time, we have a final proposed draft permit that is accompanied by our response to all public comments. And that goes forward to a state water board meeting in which, as staff, we are requesting the state water board to consider adoption of the draft permits. So that's the full development process through consideration of adoption. Now, the permit that the state water board adopts is goes into effect at an effective date or on an effective date that's actually specified in the permit. That effective date in itself is established per the discretion of our board and through recommendations through staff. So before I go to the next slide, I do want to point out that during this development process, there is still ample time for you to get your comments across and have further discussion, because as we continue developing this draft permit, we will be continuing with further discussions with you all. So next slide, please. All right, so as I had just mentioned, after our board considers adoption and if and when they do adopt a reissued permit, because we never want to take any of their decisions for granted, the permit becomes effective. Typically, our statewide permits, there's a minimum of 90 days before they become effective. We had a very good comment about please making the effective dates in a certain month of the year. We take all comments in account when it comes to the effective date, because we know new requirements going in effect is very serious, and it does take time for our permittees to gear up to be in compliance with the new effective requirements. We do look at how we can most easily continue the regulatory coverage that our existing enrollees have. And so typically we just kind of have our enrollees fold into the newly adopted permit that becomes effective. We do not anticipate placing requirements in which existing enrollees have to go through the full-fledged application period again. Newly required enrollees, though, must follow the procedures in the adopted permit to get enrollment or any other required reporting that will address any other creative avenues we end up placing in the permits to address the new enrollees, and especially schools. We did have some comments about how much time would schools have if they are required to enroll. And as Paul had pointed out, that is one of the areas that we're putting a lot of attention to on if we do end up regulating schools. What would be the transition? And so effective dates for requirements on schools or new enrollees may be much longer than the effective date of the permit itself. Next slide, please. And so with that, on behalf of all the State Water Board staff involved in this meeting and all the other staff and managers in which we work on our permit projects as a very large team, we want to thank you for your time. We know your time is valuable. We want to thank those that submitted questions and comments. And we hope that many of those questions and comments also reflect input from other stakeholders. We have tried our best to answer everything we can. Please, this is the time that if you're not yet listed in our email service to get further notifications for updates, please do. This is also the time to think about any other parties that may be impacted by any of the items we are suggesting for the next permit, and please invite them and share the information on how they can get involved also. So it is 11:58, and I want to make the most use of the last 2 minutes. Kyle, was there any other feedback that came in at the last minute?
I believe that is all of it so far. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And so if we missed anyone, or if we get any more questions trickling in, like at 12:01, we will make sure that we read it. So please feel confident that we have taken in your comments. With that, thank you very much.